The following talk is offered freely to ensure that no one is ever denied access to these practices and to these teachings. If you feel inspired to make a donation to support this offering, you can go to my website at jonathanfoust.com. While you're there, you can also sign up for a monthly newsletter designed to support you in your practice. Thank you, and enjoy. I grew up on a farm in the Pennsylvania Dutch country. And a lot of the kids in my kindergarten class were Amish or Mennonite. Some of them didn't speak English, and most of them did speak German, the Pennsylvania Deutsch. And all the teachers were also from that area, so they spoke, German as well. And the whole culture was very much the product of very hardworking, very pious, farm people. And very disciplined, very, very old school discipline. I remember one of the punishments that most terrified me was a boy acting up, where the teacher made a circle on the blackboard with a chalk, and he had to keep his nose inside the circle. It totally terrified me that I would do something that would get me that punishment. So I learned how to be on time, how to be quiet, and how to stand in line. That was the main thing I took away from my elementary school education. But one of the stories that we were told again and again through elementary school was the Aesop's Fable of the ant and the grasshopper. If you know that one. In a field one summer's day, a grasshopper was hopping about, chirping and singing to his heart's content. An ant passed by, bearing along with great toil an ear of corn he was taking to the nest. "Why not come and chat with me," said the grasshopper, "instead of toiling and moiling in that way?" "I'm helping to lay up food for the winter," said the ant, "and recommend you do the same." "Why bother about winter?" said the grasshopper. "We have plenty of food at present." But the ant went on his way and continued its toil. When a winter came, the grasshopper had no food and found itself dying of hunger, while it saw the ants distributing every day corn and grain from the stores they had collected in the summer. Then the grasshopper knew it's best to prepare for the days of need. I remember really clearly hearing that and having this sense of dread and thinking it's very, very clear I'm going to be the ant, not that hipster, anarchist, flower child grasshopper. Of course, I did become that flower child, anarchist, grasshopper, but the lesson of that was never really far from my mind. And we're all taught in life, if you're going to make it, you've got to work hard and you've got to prepare for winter. And if you don't, you're going to die or you're going to get left behind. And there's some comfort in being diligent and focused, but it may not be the full expression of what human potential could be. So I'd like to talk tonight about two different schools of thought, you could say. They're two different schools of meditation in some ways, about making it happen versus letting it be. So I'd like to talk about kind of the case for effort and willpower and making it happen, and what skillful effort can mean in your life. And to talk about the case for non-effort, for allowing and cultivating surrender in your life, and what a surrendered life can look like. So I just got back from New York City. I had an annual gathering with two friends, and one of my friends is one of the most willful people I've ever met in my life. He's worked in the media industry on very, very high levels, and he had this vision of something he wanted to create a while back. He loves food and he loves cooking and chefs. And what he thought was there's got to be a way I can really learn from the top chefs in the world. So he created an app called Panna, P-A-N-N-A. It's been featured by Apple a lot over the years. And in this app, you get to cook in real time with top quality chefs who own restaurants and so forth. So as they're chopping the onions, you're chopping the onions and so forth, and learn all these exquisite things. It's really, really well done. And he's poured his life into it, and it's been very, very challenging. So I was asking him about, well, what has it been like to try to kind of will this vision into process, because it's a huge thing. So he told me how he had to raise money. He had to raise a lot of money in order to get this thing off the ground. It takes a lot to do high-quality production and so forth. So he was getting some money together, but a major investor, someone he knew quite well, sent him an email and said that his team didn't think the numbers were there, and they didn't think he was going to pull through the numbers that they needed for them to finance the next round. He said, you're not going to meet the next level of metrics to require our investments. So if he pulled out, it meant the entire investor base he'd built up was going to run, and he'd be dead in the water. So he was devastated. He said he couldn't sleep. And he woke up and he just said to himself, I am not accepting this. I am not taking no for an answer. So he sent an email. He said, I'm coming to see you. And email came back saying, I'm busy all day. And he emailed me and said, that's okay, I'll wait. So he called to make an appointment. The secretary said, he's busy all day, there's no way he can see you. He said, okay, I'm going anyway. So he was in his waiting room when he showed up that next morning. And he said this, fellow walked through his waiting room, and he saw him. He said, really? And he looked at me and said, really? And he sat for like an hour and a half, and finally this guy invited him in. And he said he didn't know what overcame him, but he just looked at him and he said, you don't understand. I am not going to fail. And the investor said, you don't understand. We've seen this dozens of times. You're not going to hit your metrics. It's not going to work. And he looked at him and said, well, then this is going to be the first time in your career that it's going to work. I need $100,000 from you today. And then this guy looked at him and he said he must have seen something in his eyes, this rabid look in his eyes. And he said, 25. And David said, 50. What he talked about was how, with that setback, how devastated he was, that something rose up to persevere, to make it happen. And it's a very important element in life, but also in spiritual practice, is building your capacity for resilience, to keep going when you're beset by challenges. So he went on to tell me a little more, and months later, he had spent a lot of time looking for the right kind of investors to take it to the next level. And there's one corporation in particular, going back and forth, and they're finally setting up a meal with the head guy. And he was told, we're going through. This is, it's going to be great. We look forward to working with you. Twice he was told it was going to happen, that the paperwork was coming. And then they said, well, we got a problem. The guy you were working with has just been let go. There's a new guy coming in. And now he was completely stretched financially. He said that he had to let people go. He had people on furlough. Finally, they had the meeting, and the meeting went great. And he got an email the next day saying, "Great to meet you. As we look at strategy, we'll definitely consider you in the future." And he said he read the email, and it was like the wind was knocked out of him. He felt like his life was ending. Everything he had built. So he said he went to bed, utterly devastated. And then he woke up, and he thought, I have to keep going. And he talked about what it was like to lift yourself out. And he said, just you take one step, and then you take another step, and then you take one more, and then suddenly you're walking. You don't know how, but you keep going. And he talked about how trying to create something of this scale, said you can't assume there are any guarantees that anything is going to work, but you keep going. And in that same way, if you've ever gone through a loss in your life, where you're utterly devastated, there's something in you that just wakes up the next day, and life goes on. So another round of investing. And one investor had told him that he needed to raise $500,000 for them to continue to keep going. And he had $462,000 all set up, but he could not find $38,000. And he had, for a month and a half, he told me, he looked everywhere, everyone he had worked with, everyone he knew. And he was finally at that point where he had to furlough his employees. I'll pay you when I get the money. Some people stayed on, some people were looking for other jobs. And finally, his wife said, "I think it's over. You need to get a job and just let it go." And he thought, I have too much in. I can't fail. But he started to see her point. He said, I'm not going to figure it out. But he thought, I'll do one last Hail Mary. I'm going to go out to California, where he knew a lot of people, and I'm going to try and find the rest of this money. Left on a Monday, and he said, if by Friday I don't have the money, it's over. Everything I put in, it's over. He could only get 3 meetings that whole week, and nothing came out of it. And on Thursday night, he was sitting in his hotel room, he knew it was over, he was just totally depressed. And he said, I give up. I've now given up. So one of his board members said, let's go to dinner. We're having dinner with my roommate from college. Come and join us, just have a drink. And he said, why don't you tell him what you're up to? He thought, it's done, it's over. He said, I just want to have a couple drinks and go to bed and go home and start looking for work. And so as they were having dinner, this guy's college roommate said, what are you doing? He told him about the app and his vision and all he was creating. And he said, but I'm letting it go. I can't come up with the money. And this guy said, well, how much do you need? He said, I need $38,000. And this college roommate said, oh, I can give that to you. And he thought, why, God, did you put me through this? Why couldn't I have met this guy a month and a half ago? And to this day, he was just telling me what a puzzle it is, to have worked so hard. And when he gave up, some kind of grace came, and to kind of take him over that. And so, in a way, he was telling me how you work and you focus really hard, and you wait for grace. And grace may never come, but it might. And he was telling me how how this business enterprise taught him more about the Dharma than anything he had ever done. So think about what you've manifested in your life. Working toward a degree, working towards some vision that you've had. And think of the challenges that you have met and how much you've sacrificed to make that. There's a quality of resilience that you can develop in your life and in your spiritual practice that is utterly transforming. And part of skillful living is about really knowing what you want. Know what you want, and then figure out the roadmap. Get some guidance. What are the best routes to take? What are the routes to avoid? What are the role models? Who's done it before? What are the skillful means that are going to get you there? It's a tremendous process, and it can be very, very exciting. Because you learn. And as you learn, you feel more alive. So part of our weekend adventure, which was set up by my friend David, was a lot of things I hadn't done before in a long time, and one of them was bowling. I'm in bed around 9. So at around 10:30, we're in Brooklyn bowling. It's been about 40 years since I had bowled. And we're in this bowling alley, and there's live music from some New Orleans band, and people there to watch the band, and it was just surreal. And so I'm just trying to bowl, and it's just horrible, gutter balls and no sense of control whatsoever. And then they were saying, well, see those little arrows, and here's how you hold the ball, and aim with your thumb. And so I started, as we went through and played a couple of games, I started looking around well, who are the really good people, and how do they set themselves up? And I got better. I was still terrible, but I got at least 50% better, over the course of an hour of bowling. And there was something very exciting about that. I don't feel called to do much more bowling, but you know what it's like when you take on something new and you don't know how to do it, but then you look and you practice and you study, and then you begin to realize that there's a level of skill that you've cultivated in that period of time. That element of focus and resilience is so important. And the mantra in this form of practice is keep going. You just keep going. And you may have noticed this in your meditation practice, that you become more skillful in the practice. You begin to realize that not every thought is something you have to believe. You realize that there are times when it's really, really focused and there's a sense of ease, and times when your mind is really scattered, but you keep going, and you begin to sense, wow, there's more and more capacity for being the witness to your life, for having that access to non-judging awareness. And you begin to notice that you're a little bit less reactive, a little bit more responsive. And it is quite thrilling to feel yourself change in that way. So much success comes from focus and resilience and making it happen. But if it's out of balance, there can be something really missing in there too. The greatest regret of the dying is I wasn't true to myself. We miss the primary aim of our life because we get hijacked by the doing. We realize that what we've been trying to make happen wasn't really what we wanted to make happen. Which is why it's so important to take that sacred pause, to really ask yourself, what is it that I really want from this life? And is what I'm doing today and tomorrow aligned with how I want to feel at the end? So that skillful effort, that making it happen, really is aligned with your deepest heart's calling. And there's something in here about finding balance between willfully making it happen and other alternatives. So I'd heard about this story a couple of years ago. It really kind of blew my mind. There's this ultra endurance race in Australia, and it's 5 days, and I think it's it's 544 miles in 5 days, and this guy named Cliff Young showed up. Most of the athletes here were in the prime of their lives, training their entire life for these ultra marathons. And Cliff, who showed up, grew up on a 2,000-acre sheep farm in Australia with about 2,000 sheep. That's 1 acre per sheep, for those of you who might need help on that. And so on the farm, they didn't have ATVs to round up the sheep. It was just Cliff, So he showed up, 61 years old, for the Melbourne Ultramarathon, 544-mile race from Sydney to Melbourne. They take days to finish. It's running a marathon 20 times in a row, basically. So this guy shows up, and everyone's got their Lycra and all this stuff. This guy shows up in overalls and boots. And he figured he would be out he said, I would be out there for 3 days rounding up sheep, and 2 more days, that's nothing. So when he showed up, people thought it was a publicity stunt. Because, this guy showing up in overalls and these tall boots. And finally, after a lot of back and forth, they let him into the race. And when when everyone took off, they left Cliff in the dust. And people were smirking because he didn't even run properly. He looked leisurely, like he was sort of shuffling. And that style of running became known as the young shuffle. And they said it kind of looks like you're trying to make it to the bathroom without having an accident. That kind of a run. So just to read here, all the professional runners trained to run 18 hours a day and sleep for the remaining 6. But Cliff had his own agenda. He ran all through the night. As the morning of the second day came, everyone was surprised. Not only was Cliff still in the race, but he had continued to jog through the night. As the days passed, Cliff crept closer to the world-class runners. By the 5th and final night of the race, he has surpassed all of the other athletes. He was the first competitor to cross the finish line with a record-setting time of 5 days, 15 hours, and 4 minutes. So he received $10,000 for winning the race, but he gave 5 of the other runners $2,000 just because he thought they would need it. I love that story because here's a guy who found his own pace. It wasn't, make it happen and collapse, make it happen, make it collapse. He had his own way of starting off slow and making his way through. And it's such an interesting way to look at how we live our lives. When we come from a place of fear, there's a clench, there's a grip, and there's a grimness that we bring to our lives. when we're really in touch with our own sort of biology, there's a sense of ease that informs us through life as well. So I'd like to offer just a little bit of practice, kind of contrasting sort of the willful practice and the surrender practice, and talk a little more about the surrender practices. So in terms of willful practice, there are lots of different strategies for meditation. There are some traditions where you sit very, very firm without moving, and there's someone in the back of the room with a stick. I'm not making this up. And if they notice you beginning to drift, someone will come by your side and they'll sort of tap you on the shoulder, and then you bow, and then they bow, and then they whack you with a stick, and then you bow, and they bow, and then they go to the back of the room. So we're going to try that. So Bob, do you have the whip? Another form of practice is called the Aditan meditation, and it's translated as the sitting of strong determination. And it can be a very profound practice where you sit, again, with a determination not to move a muscle. And what I found in that practice is sometimes it is absolutely riveting. It sort of kicks in a very intense sense of witness. And then you're aware of everything that's moving and kind of that unmoving quality of the witness. Most of the time it's just excruciating, but sometimes it can be really quite profound. So what I'd like to do is just to guide you through a few minutes of just to sort of taste really willful practice. And then we're going to kind of switch gears into kind of another way of paying attention. So if you would sit tall, and actually, if you want to amp it up a little bit, slide your butt forward from the back of your chair. So you're sitting with your back unsupported. Draw your navel in toward your spine. Place your feet flat on the floor. And bring your hands, whether just comfortable in your lap or palms down on the tops of your thighs. Now lengthen through the back of the neck so you'll feel the chin parallel. Draw your attention to the rim of the nostrils, or even perhaps to the little patch of skin just below the nostrils. Let the breath be completely relaxed. There's no control of the breath. But let your primary attention be on the nostrils, with a little patch of skin under the nostrils. And for the next few minutes, make an intention not to move a muscle other than the mechanism of breathing. When the mind wanders, bring it directly back to your point of concentration. Is it possible to sharpen your focus? Body perfectly still. Focused on the rim of the nostrils or just below the nostrils. One more minute. And now release the technique. Let your attention broaden and widen. And if you like, you can deepen your breath and let your eyes open. Did you feel a shift of some kind in those few minutes? The mind is quite often, as you know, it's sort of constantly scanning for danger. And when you're under stress, hypervigilance becomes the name of the game, because you're just constantly looking for anything that might be of danger. When you can rivet your attention like that, the very paradoxical things begins to occur. As challenging as it can be to stay one-pointed, that one-pointedness has a quality of calming. It also can really sharpen the sense of the witness, because you become very aware when the mind wanders. You're either in concentration, you're either doing the technique or you're not. Either you're there or you're not. So it sharpens that sense of self-awareness. And it can also sharpen this twofold quality of meditation, noticing what's happening as it's happening, but also noticing your relationship to it. So in that same way as my friend David was trying to make that deal happen, he kept coming back and coming back and coming back and building that sense of resilience, which is a really powerful thing to cultivate. When you can build that sense of resilience, you can stay present to all kinds of phenomena as they occur. But there's another side to practice as well, and it's really illustrated beautifully by the story. Tara tells the story a lot, and it is a really wonderful example. It's the story of the early test pilots, testing the latest high altitude planes. And quite a few people died as they were seeing how high they could go into the atmosphere, because they would lose consciousness, and quite often they would sort of reach a height where the avionics were completely different, and the plane wouldn't respond in the way that it would respond before. And they would be, you could hear them on the radio just fighting to control the tiller on the plane, but it wasn't responding because all of the physics were different. And as a result, out of the efforting, that the pilots would lose control and many people died. One pilot who was, again, repeating this again, high altitude, was fighting the tiller, and then he lost consciousness, And he didn't die, because when he let go of the tiller, the plane leveled out on its own. So the instructions from then on became, when these phenomena occur, the instructions are let go. And in the letting go, there is kind of a natural righting that occurs. And so sometimes it's very skillful to let go. And in the letting go, very interesting things can arise. So just as there are techniques that are all about concentration and focus, there are also these beautiful techniques that are completely designed to cultivate your capacity to surrender, to let go of this small doing self, and to let yourself be held by the mystery or the vastness of things. It's kind of an interesting contrast, as different traditions have different techniques that are somewhat reflective of their geography. Kind of in some of the orthodox practices in the jungles and the forests, much of the focus is sort of internal, But a lot of the Tibetan practices, high up in the mountains, well, the practice is actually big sky, opening to sky. It's beautifully summarized by this wonderful story of Chogyam Rinpoche, the founder of Naropa, as he was lecturing to a class. On the easel, he put a V on the easel, and he said, "What is this?" And a few people raised their hands, and someone said, "It's a bird." I said, "No, it's the sky with a bird flying through it." So in this technique, rather than focusing on the bird, you're actually focusing on the sky. So let's try another little technique. So if you like, you can close your eyes. And ask yourself these questions. What could relax right now? And what could soften right now? And what could let go right now? Imagine that your practice was to let go of all control. No manipulation of your experience whatsoever, but simply to be awake to what is already here. Imagine, if you would, that there is nothing to do and nothing to solve, but only to be. You might, in your own time, now let your breath deepen. And if you'd like, you can let your eyes open. I'm aware of the time. I'm aware this is really at least a two-part talk. But I want to say a few things about the inquiry into what it means to let go. There are some traditions that speak about absolute abandoning all effort, just living a pure life of surrender. Basically just saying yes to what occurs, which is a little radical and a little challenging when you have a mortgage to pay and that sort of thing. But I think what we do have access to are glimpses of what it means to let go. I sort of have this little joke when I have a Dharma talk. Well, I'll say to Tara, I said, well, I'm going to go into my idea room. And the idea room is the shower. You know how some of your best ideas come in the shower? When you're in a place where you're undefended. One of the most fascinating things for me is this relationship between meditation and intuition, or the whole realm of insight. Sometimes this practice we do here is called insight meditation. And I've come to realize that you cannot make intuition happen, but you can cultivate an optimal environment for it to happen. And it comes from those just the moments of pausing and letting go. It's an artist looking at a blank canvas, or a writer looking at a blank piece of paper. It's that sense of just pausing and sensing and moving into form. Anytime you pause and you inquire, what is most important right now? That pause opens you to a sense of letting go, where you can be informed back into the balance of doing. Because for most of us, life is a constant process of action and pause, action and rest. And as yoga philosophy says, the more dynamic your rest, the more dynamic your activity. Which is why when you can calm your nervous system through these willful practices, they're very powerful for drawing attention and calming. But there's always something important about pointing toward the letting go. Because it's in the letting go that you open again to the mystery. And you can take that cycle right back into action again. So just one last little short inquiry, because we're right at the end. If you like, you can close your eyes. And take a moment to feel this breath. Let yourself arrive in the here and now. And let yourself pause and then just internally respond to this question. You're just completing the following phrase. The most important thing in my life right now is. If no words come immediately, just find some words that resonate for you. And as you reflect on those words, just sense how they feel, how they resonate on the inside. And sense how much of your life is informed by your relationship to the mystery. And the power of deeply pausing. And when you're ready, you can deepen your breath. And when you're ready, you can let your eyes open. Thank you for your time and your attention. Whatever you do, let it be informed by being. There's mindful discussion happening afterward. Thank you for your support for the class. Happy Thanksgiving. May it be filled with ease. I'll see you next week. Good night.